So
Anderson, I'm not being tough. I'm just a friend standing up for another friend who I believe is innocent, that merely was on a walk through our neighborhood that had been riddled with burglaries, other crimes, break-ins to vehicles, thefts, some as petty as robbing somebody's gas grill off our backyard. But you
had been on the neighborhood watch yourself.
Yes.
And you said there have been a number of burglaries in the area. Why are you standing by him? Because there's only been a handful of people who know him who have really been standing by him, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Everybody wants to convict George prior to any sort of due process. You know, let's become students of facts instead of professors of myths. I'm going to share this with you. In my conversation with George on Monday, he shared with me certain points, not actually of the night, because I asked him, I said, George, what happened at night? He said, I can't really discuss that with you, Frank. I'd love to. And I read to him the police narrative in it where the attending officer or the on-site officer stated in his report that he was within close contact of Mr. Zimmerman, and he noticed that his nose was bloodied, the back of his head had bruises, and his pants and the back of his jacket were wet, and there was grass stains all over it. Now the question is this officer did not know George Zimmerman. Why? Or there was no real precedent for him to embellish or add to the police narrative. George wanted me to share that with the public, that when I said, can I go with this? He says, stick to that story. And one other thing that was critical, he said that he was yelling for help, it's in the police report, and that no one would help him.
There's been difference of opinion over who it was yelling for help. Trayvon Martin's mother insists that is her son's voice yelling for help. One eyewitness said that they believed it was Trayvon Martin yelling for help. Another says it was George Zimmerman. So there's been a difference of opinion of that. And again, a lot of the facts of this case aren't known. But what is George Zimmerman like, as you know him?
George was a model neighbor. He was caring, and in his caring, he took on a role that was totally voluntary. He did not receive any compensation. He wanted to ensure the safety of all the residents in in the Twin Lakes complex.
You didn't know, though, he was carrying a gun?
No.
So you had been on neighborhood watch before, but when you were on the watch, you weren't carrying a gun?
No. The most I would probably have carried would be pepper spray or something non-lethal.
Do you think, this is going to go to trial, assuming it goes to trial, assuming there's not a plea deal, do you think he will get a fair trial, and do you think he will be vindicated?
Absolutely. He'll be exonerated of all charges.
You have no doubt about that?
No doubt. And the reason why I say that is I wanted to share this with you, Anderson. He said, Frank, he said there's truth in the 911 tapes. And let me just spell one thing up front. When George called Sanford Dispatch that night, he did not call in on a 911 line. He wanted me to share that with you. It was a non-emergency line. And the prior calls on one of them on February 2nd, 3 weeks before Trayvon was shot, was a call that my home was being burglarized. And due to the diligence and the efforts of George Zimmerman, my friend, who will be exonerated, he helped stop that burglary by staying in a position of surveillance. He called Sanford Police, and he shared this with me on Monday. And also, he ID'd the person who was attempting to break into my house as the same person that did burglarize a neighbor of mine just 4 doors down 5 days later. And here's the best twist of all. That person resided in our complex, just 4 or 5 houses down.
George Zimmerman, the man acquitted in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, has been charged with stalking a private investigator. According to the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, Zimmerman threatened and harassed private investigator Dennis Warren in December of last year. Warren had reportedly contacted Zimmerman about a documentary on Trayvon Martin. Investigators said Zimmerman then sent text messages to Warren threatening to feed him to an alligator and made threats against Warren's family. Zimmerman is charged with misdemeanor stalking.
Back with social commentator Scheherazade Ali, attorney Mark Eiglarsh, radio show host Brian Copeland. Joining us, George Zimmerman's friend and supporter, Frank Taaffe. Now, Frank, you don't think Rachel made good points about race, do you?
You know, I got a problem with Rachel, and here's the deal. Shelley Zimmerman, George's wife, was arrested for lying under oath. And yet Rachel Gentile, on 2 separate occasions, under oath to the state attorney's office, perjured herself. But yet, we want to talk about a dual standard here, yet Shelley was arrested for perjury, but Miss Rachel or Miss Precious or Miss Diamond Eugene, whatever she goes by.
Come on, Frank. You're back. Come on,
Miss
Frank.
Gentile, hold on. Okay, hold on. Let me finish and make my point. Shelley was arrested for perjury, and Miss Diamond Eugene, Rachel Gentile, went on record and said that she did lie under oath. But yet, she wasn't arrested? Come on, I want to hear your response.
Miss Ali.
Why wasn't she arrested?
Miss Ali, then Mark.
Perjury is perjury.
Yes.
Perjury is perjury.
I want to respond.
Go ahead.
No,
Oh,
I
she didn't
definitely
lie?
want to respond to that.
Go ahead.
Listen to me.
I wanna hear
As
it.
black people, we are a victim of educational fraud. Every history book in this country is a lie. Everything that has been written about
She's
who
a
did
liar.
what, who invented
She
what, has been a
lied.
lie. So
She
don't
was
talk
on
to me
Piers
about
Morgan
lying,
last
because y'all are the
night and
biggest
said
liars on the
that
planet.
Trayvon was going back to whoop that ass.
Okay, hold on.
Trayvon was going back to whoop that ass.
Frank, hold on a second.
Well, I from attorney friends I know and cases I've had a chance to look into, you know, he's absolutely right that in every single case, I mean, you look at divorce cases, I mean, look at civil cases, somebody's always lying. And
We're talking about this one. Let's talk about
We're
this
talking
one.
about this
one
particular
is front
case.
and
I am
center.
not.
Let's
in the
talk about
you know
this
what,
one.
Frank?
People.
Hey, you know what, Frank? Can you stop auditioning for a Fox gig for 10 seconds and let somebody else talk? Do you mind?
Go, Brian,
I
go.
told you, you're not going to bully me.
Go,
on this
Brian.
program.
Go ahead.
All right, but anyway, the bottom line here is
That's the way you
really,
feel,
I find
man.
it offensive. I find it very offensive that Frank says it isn't about race when you heard what he does. He race baits every chance he gets. I've seen your Twitter account.
You
Frank,
guys
where you're
bring
calling
up the
black
race.
people cotton
There's going to
pickers.
be 100 cities
Excuse me, Frank.
marching
I've seen
to arrest
your
Mr.
I have
Zimmerman
seen your
on
Twitter
civil
account
rights tomorrow.
I have seen.
Sharpton
I have
is having
seen. Can I
a
say
rally.
something here? Again, you're not going to shout me down.
Go ahead. I want
I've
to hear what you
seen-
say.
I
Go,
have
Brian.
seen your
Intelligently.
Twitter account. On your Twitter account, you've called African Americans cotton pickers. On your Twitter account, you have told black people that
Man,
they're
you
using
don't know what
Negro
you're talking
logic.
about.
On your
You
Twitter
don't know
account,
what
you've
you're
told
talking
people
about,
to stop talking
bro.
because you're going to go and
Hey,
watch
bro,
Roots.
you don't know what you're talking about, bro.
Well, what do you mean, Frank? What do you mean? If that was that on your Twitter account or not?
No, it was not.
I have it. I have the printouts. I have the
Unequivocally
printouts. I have the printouts.
I don't
I'm
care
happy to
what
show
you
them to
got, man.
Do we really
you know
wanna
what?
just-
You ain't got it. This ain't a court of law, buddy.
Okay, Frank, hold on a second.
Just bring it, bro.
Miss Ali, you got your hand nicely held up there. I want to go to you. Spoken supporter and social commentator Scheherazade Ali. She's the author of The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man. So, Frank, Miss Ali would rather bash her head on the ground than go to dinner with you. Don't you want to ask her out?
Yeah, Miss Ali, I would like to give you a personal invitation to my home at the retreat at Twin Lakes and take you on a personal tour. And, you know, I'm a great Italian cook, if you like Italian food. And I'll put you in charge of the drinks and the dessert. How about Arizona tea and Skittles?
No. Oh, Frank,
Oh,
come on.
come on, Frank. That's like, what are you doing?
No.
No, too soon.
Frank.
I
All right.
mean,
Let's go back to the beginning. Right after the shooting, George was taken down to the station, and there were 11 Sanford Police Department members, the chief of police, and the state attorney, all aggregately speaking, probably over 150 years of law enforcement experience. They decided not to charge George Zimmerman with any crime because they couldn't find probable cause. And it was only until Mr. Benjamin Crump. Let me finish.
No, let's talk
It
about
wasn't
those
until
11 police officers.
Are you gonna yak or you want me to talk?
Frank, please
Okay?
finish, and then Miss Ali. Go ahead, Frank, finish.
Benjamin Crump wrote a letter, and you tell me when I'm off base here. Mr. Crump wrote a letter to the Department of Justice soon afterwards when there was no charges filed against George Zimmerman. In that letter, he stated that the Sanford Police Department had malfeasance on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman, who was a former magistrate with the somewhere in Virginia, up in Manassas, Virginia, and that he somehow compelled the state attorney and the chief of police not to charge George Zimmerman with any crime.
All right.
So guess what? They had no probable cause then, and they still don't have probable cause until you guys went out there and wrote the letters.
Wait, Frank, you put people off sometimes the way you present things that are right.
Hey, Dr. Drew, let me bring up one thing to this panel.
Go ahead.
To your venerated panel here. On the night George was arrested and the police did not find any probable cause, and in order to have arrest, you have to have probable cause.
Yeah.
What the hell was in it for Chief Bill Lee and Norman Wolfinger, state attorney, not to arrest him? What was in it? What was in it? Why didn't they do it and just say, go hammer this crap out in
Trayvon
court?
Martin was black. That's what was in it.
Oh, please,
That's what
come
was
on.
in it.
You really
Trayvon
believe
was
that?
black. That's what
they
was in
didn't
it.
even know George Zimmerman, and
Yes,
you just
sir, I
said he
know
wasn't
that.
a white guy. You said he's a brown guy or whatever, and you're still making us pay for slavery
He's down
today.
there pretending to be white.
Let's
You're still carrying the bill for slavery to
hang
us.
on, Mark,
Why
go
don't
ahead.
you move on?
Mark, go ahead.
Listen, I think both of you are a little whatever, but Frank, to mock or mimic the way Ms. Ali says police is really inappropriate, and that upsets me.
I'm not mocking her.
I heard
mocking her.
you.
Did he do that?
That's the way I say it. That's the way I say it.
Miss Ali.
Police,
Frank.
police,
Miss Ali,
police,
do you
whatever you
think
want to call it.
do you think the defense was able
Police.
to connect with that all-female
Police.
jury, Miss Ali?
He was once one of George Zimmerman's most outspoken advocates, but now former Neighborhood Watch volunteer Frank Taaffe says his opinion about Zimmerman's not guilty verdict has changed.
Absolutely. What I know of George and his tendencies, and also my opinion is that he racially profiled Trayvon Martin that night, because if that had been a white kid on a cell phone walking through our neighborhood, he wouldn't have stayed on him the way he did, and that's a fact, and I believe that in my heart.
But that's not what Taaffe told News 13 numerous times after the shooting, including during an interview back in May 2012.
George Zimmerman, once again, in a position or in a volunteer role, wanted to ensure the safety of the community that he lived in, and he became the victim. You know, I can only ask for the country to forgive me. And today I believe that he racially profiled him based on the color of his skin.
Some people may wonder, what does Frank Taaffe have to gain by doing this? You know, are you working on a book right now? Are you working on
No book.
a TV show? Or
No. I'm just working on me right now and getting right with God.
Taaffe says his brother's death last month and the death of two of his sons over the past few years has changed him. Taaffe says he also has a message for Trayvon Martin's parents.
Yes, I'm sorry that you lost your son. I know what that's like. And I wish things had been different.
We reached out to George Zimmerman through his brother Robert. Both declined to comment. George Zimmerman was found not guilty of second-degree murder last July. The Department of Justice has an open investigation into the death of Trayvon Martin to see if any of his civil rights were violated.